Bang! Neeves knives. I'm Jared, my lovely wife Kara's busy, and today we are doing a knife talk about edges. First up, I just want to say that we do a live every Wednesday and Saturday at 7:30 p.m. Central Time, so check the day if you want to join us for a live 7:30 p.m. Central Time, Wednesdays and Saturdays. Also, we have a whole bunch of links down in the description if you want to check out sharpening supplies, knives, anything like that. It definitely helps our channel if you use those links. Also, let's get to this video. If you want to support us in any way, there's also the Patreon link down there, and you can also support us by coming to the lives and donating. Let's get into this video. So, we're going to talk about edges, different edges, convex edges, V-grinds, KME, freehand, and we're going to look at a couple different grip patterns. I'm going to try to make this video as quick as possible because I could go on and on about this subject for a long time. So instead of fitting everything in this, I'm just going to try to stick on a couple things. Okay, so first up, we're going to look at a factory edge. So this Spyderco Stretch does have a factory edge. Let's take a look at it. Now, most factory edges are at a lower grit, and they're done by a belt. So some people worry about them being a burnt edge because they're using a belt going very fast. They put it up to the belt and they run it across the belt. Now, without water, that definitely can burn the edge, and sometimes you can kind of see it. If you see like a whitish line going right behind the edge, that usually means it was burnt. Or if it's dark, that's another way. Also, they run it across the belt grinder, or the belt when they're sharpening, and then they can take it to a strop after, which is usually a wheel, or they can freehand that, but they usually don't. They usually do it on like a buffing wheel kind of. But let's zoom in here and see if we can get it. So you'll notice the grit lines go straight up and down. That's one way to tell that it is a factory edge. Because the grit lines are very even and they go straight up and down, and that's from running it across a belt that is spinning or that's going in a circle. So you'll see that they're nice and straight. Now, you can replicate this doing freehand or even with a KME, but it takes more time. But what I like about a resharpened edge is that, unlike this where all the teeth are facing straight down, because you got to think about this grip pattern like teeth. So when you're cutting whatever direction, you want the teeth to go towards what you're cutting rather than just going right on top. And think about like a saw blade, right? I guess some saw blades do have teeth that are just poke straight out rather than at an angle, but I like my grip pattern to go at an angle, and the reason why is because that's always the direction you're cutting no matter what. That way the teeth are facing it. Some factories do better edges than others, but a lot of them are very uneven and sometimes are hard to make even just from the first sharpening. Sometimes it takes a couple different edges to really get them nice and even after a factory has made them uneven, which in a lot of ways it's not that big of a deal because it's a knife's edge. As long as it's sharp, it works. Now let's look at a sharpened edge. Now first I will show you a freehand edge, and then I will move on to a KME edge. So you see the difference in the grip pattern, how the grip pattern on this one is going straight up and down, and then on this one it's going towards this way. They're all going like this. Now, if I had to guess, I would guess that this is about a 400 grit finish. I know a lot of factories, that's about what they put their edges at, is about 400 grit. This one is 600 grit. By the way, I might be giving this away here very soon. Para 3 lightweight. Spyderco Para 3 lightweight, and this is the Spyderco Stretch 2. Okay, so now let's look at a KME edge. Now a KME edge, or a fixed angled system, is where the knife is clamped into a system, and then there's usually a rod and the stone. So basically you're clamping the knife in to a system, and then you're bringing the stone to the knife's edge rather than bringing the knife to the stone. So let's check out this KME edge. By the way, this is the Cody Usler Duckling. So you can see this one's a polished KME edge. Now, KME edges are very nice. I have nothing against them. I think any way for you to make your edge sharp is incredible. So that's, as long as you have a sharp edge, that's what's important. But sometimes, like, depending on how much, like, I don't want anybody to think that you get a fixed angle system and it's just going to do all the work for you. That's not the case. You still have to understand how to sharpen, how grip patterns go, and stuff like that. So what you'll notice here on this one is that this is a polished edge, which is done very, very nicely. If I was ever going to critique this edge, the only thing I would say, which, let me just say this really quick, any edge can be critiqued by anybody. So anybody could take one of my knives and critique them too. This is no offense. This is not saying anything. All I'm saying is that I see that it's a mirror polished, and you'll see that there's still a little bit of the last grit on there. And I would say that that's only because the lower grits, there wasn't enough time spent with the lower grits. So when you don't spend a lot of time with the lower grits, what tends to happen is when you move up and up and up, that grit, it's hard for it to take out the lower grits, because it wasn't very, like, because either one, it wasn't extremely even, or two, the next grit above, say, the lowest grit, there wasn't enough time spent, so now you still have some gouges, and then the higher grit you go, the harder it's going to be to get out that lowest grit. Hopefully that made sense. Either way, this is still very nice. I'm trying to get it to come up. Shiny edges are very hard to get to come up. But it's still a very nice even edge. It's the V grind is done really good. I can see the angle is done very well. Also, another difference with the KME is that, you know, since you have the stone and you're bringing it to the edge, A lot of people are doing a scrubbing motion, which that's not a big deal or anything. I'm just saying the difference. And you can do it where you take the stone and you run it up and bring it back, run it up. That will bring the grip pattern at an angle. Now, if you do the scrubbing motion, your grip pattern is going to be straight up and down. So depending on how you use it, depends on how you lay the grip pattern down on there. Now, whichever way you do it, you want to continue that. That will help you remove the last grip pattern nice and evenly, as long as you're doing the same motion over and over. There's nothing wrong with either one. I'm just saying that that's, how you do it. So a convex edge is where it's rounded. A V grind is a V. So this is the edge. And we've been looking at V grinds. And then a convex edge is like that. So this is a convex edge, and I put this on a knife that I sharpened for somebody. One, because he chipped it pretty bad, and I had to remove quite a bit of steel. And so I got to a it's getting pretty thick. So that way the edge is going to be stronger, and it's going to require less sharpenings. If I did a V grind at the angle I had to do, it could possibly be brittle, or not. I'm not saying it's going to be brittle. It'll be more brittle than if I put a convex edge. So a convex edge is stronger, but it also isn't, in my opinion, as sharp as a V grind, but it passes through materials easier than a V grind. I know that kind of doesn't make sense. So the edge bites into stuff better on a V grind, but doesn't go through materials as good as a convex. A convex is stronger and easier to strop, in my opinion. So let's look at this convex. You will notice, if I can stop moving, how instead of it being perfectly flat, it's kind of rounded. And remember, I'm not talking about these right here. Those are serrations. I'm talking about just this edge right here. And you'll notice that it's rounded towards the tip instead of going straight. If you can tell. Still very sharp, but this way it makes it nice and strong and easy to strap. You'll notice the grip pattern is still running at an angle. Now let's look at a V grind really quick. And let's look down at 2. And you will see how this one is flat. Here, I got a better idea. I can take it. Let's get a bigger edge. So let's look at this V grind. Now you see how it's very flat. Versus rounded. We'll look at another one. Here, let's look at this one. This one's a higher grit. So this one's about 5,000 grit. But you might be able to see how flat it is. Now, the higher grits, they do look better, but they don't perform as good, in my opinion. Well, it depends on what you're cutting to. So, in my opinion, they don't last as long, or they last longer than a lower grit finish. So you're going to have to strap more on a lower grit finish. But they also tend to drop their grip pretty quick. So like if you have a high grit and you make a couple cuts, your grip pattern is it's going down very rapidly. Although it's going to strop. Man, how do I put this into words? Okay, so a lower grit is going to cut better than a higher grit, depending on what you're cutting. But it's also going to require more stropping, meaning like after using it for the day, you're going to want it, or a few times you're going to want to strop it back to true, because there's more teeth. Now, a polished finish is going to, or a higher grit, after just a couple cuts, that polished finish isn't going to be there no more. It's going to start getting wear. Now, it's going to last longer because the teeth are finer. So there's not going to be as much damage to the teeth. But even though there might not be as much damage to the teeth cutting certain things, it's also more fragile in some areas. Like if you hit something harder than it, or hit something hard at all, you have a chance of chipping it easier or deforming the edge easier. Now, when it comes to just cutting regular stuff like cardboard, paper, rope, and stuff like that, the lower grit finish is going to need stropping more often, and the higher grit finish is going to last longer in that regard. But if you nick something or hit something, it's also going to be more fragile. So like I said, depending on what you're cutting and how you're using your knife, and also depending on how often you use your knife, how hard you use your knife, and stuff like that. Some materials are more aggressive than others, and also some steels are harder and stronger than others. So there's a lot of factors put into play. And just like some steels don't do good at high grits. They just don't. They might polish really good, but they don't perform good. And then some steels, they don't do good at a lower grit. They need a higher grit to get their best performance. So that's a whole nother subject. Here's another polished edge, and then we'll look at some more lower ones really quick. If I can even get this to come up. I don't think it's going to because it's a black edge. Here's a lower grit. And you see how flat it is. This is a V grind. Nice and flat. And this is about 600 grit. Now, I'm going to show you another 600 grit, but this one, it looks like a 1200 grit because I spent a lot more time on that stone. So, unlike the other ones where I spent the time it took to get, the burr and knock off the burr, this one I spent more time on. So the edge is flatter, the grip pattern is finer, and it's sharper, in my opinion, to the touch. It's very sharp. Well, I don't know about sharper because it's definitely hair whittling and very, very sharp. I don't want to say it's sharper though, because that, talking like that, that's not, like the other 600 grit finish. It's going to be more aggressive than that one. So I'm going to say it's finer. But This one, I put a 1200 grit finish on. You can kind of see in the middle between the polished 5000, and this is a very good grit. In my opinion, this is about as high as you go in sharpness on most steels. Not all steels, because like I said, all steels are made differently or different. So, but for the most part, I feel like once you get to 1200 grit, you're not going to get any sharper. You're just going to get more polished and more finer, as long as you spend the right amount of time on the 1200 grit. Maybe 2000 with some steels, so depending on the steel. Also, this is D2, so I don't normally like to go too high. Like, I normally don't even go this high to 1200. I normally go only to about 600 to 800, but this is very, very sharp still, especially for D2 on that that high of a grit. Now, this is also very thin behind the edge, so yeah. All right, guys. Hopefully this made sense, but I love you guys. Thank you guys for watching this knife talk. Peace.